In this lesson, we're going to look at note-taking. I will teach you a style of note-taking called the 3-keyword system of note-taking, and I will also introduce 2 different formats of setting up your notes. So if you took eScience 8 last year, you are familiar with the 3-keyword system. Please take this as a review and stick around for the next step of formatting the notes. So the best way to prevent plagiarism is to take good notes. As much as possible, you want to write information out in your own words or only use enough words that are necessary to remember and understand key points and concepts. The less information that you're actually copying out word for word, the better, because the less likelihood that you're going to actually copy that information directly into a project and commit plagiarism. So I will briefly go through the 3 keywords notes taking system with an example here. This is taken from the Crossroads textbook from page 63, and it's about Louis XIV and the origins of ballet. So I've taken one paragraph, and the idea is that for each sentence that contains significant information, you are going to select 3, sometimes 4 words keywords that provide enough information that when you look back at them, you'll be able to remember what the main point was. So in the first sentence, the rules of ballet were first established by the dancing master to the court of Louis XIV. I have selected the words ballet, established, and Louis XIV. Now I should mention that with this system, numbers, such as the Roman numeral for 14 there, don't count. So you don't have to count those as being part of the 3 keywords. With that, you see I've transferred those 3 words into my notes there, and just from those 3 words I can remember that the main idea was that ballet was established by Louis XIV, and specifically not him, but people who worked for him. In the next line it says Louis insisted that the nobles learn ballet so that they could be graceful at all times. Again, I've selected 3 keywords: insisted, nobles, graceful, and from that, later when I look at that, I will remember that the significance of that was that Louis insisted that the nobles learn ballet to be graceful. In the next line, slip-ups could mean losing one's apartment at the Palace of Versailles or being asked to leave the royal court. I've got slip-ups, leave royal court. Again, I would remember that that meant that any slip-ups in the ballet meant that they would have to leave the royal court. And then finally, the end to all dreams for power and influence, end power influence. And I will remember what that means. So there's an example of how to write out 3 keywords as your notes. So when you actually go to write out your notes, I would like you to use one of 2 different formats. So this is one of the formats. This is called the Cornell note-taking system. And so your page is going to be divided into these sections, and you can see at the top you have a topic, and you would write the topic. So for those last notes that I just showed you, the topic would be the ballet and Louis XIV. Or Louis XIV's influence on ballet, something like that. In the first column, you'd have a cue or question. You wouldn't worry about that at this point, though. First, you'd go and you'd take your notes. So for each, let me go back. So for each box, that represents a paragraph. Okay, so a topic, right? Every paragraph focuses on a specific topic. So for each box, I'd write all of my points for that paragraph in this notes column. Once I had all of my notes done up, so all those key points, I would go down and complete a summary. So put it all together, what does it all mean? And then lastly, I would go through and for each box, for each note paragraph section, I would come up with either a question or a cue. So the cue might just be a word, and I'll show you that in more detail here in a minute. Now the other setup you can use, and it still follows the basic premise of the Cornell note-taking system, just looks a little different, is a sheet like this. So you have your topic, and so you would put the topic of each paragraph, so again like a cue word. You would have your notes in the center, and then for each paragraph you'd have a main idea that you'd write out. Alright. Okay, so let's go through this one together here. And so here is a piece from the textbook about life in an early fishery. And I'm going to show you how you would use the Cornell note-taking setup to take your notes here. And so you would have your topic, and so the topic, we're just going to use the title of this piece. So life in an early fishery. And I'm going to say 1500s just to be a little bit more specific here. Here's where you'd put your bibliography information. So remember that you do need to be including a bibliography with your research project. And so for now, all I might do is write the name of the textbook and the page number. Now, you could also, to save your time later, you could write all of the bibliography information, so the publication, date of publication, and all that information if you wanted to. Or you could go and add that information later. So again, with this system, you don't write the cue or the question now, you start with the notes, and we're going to use the 3 keyword notes. So I'm going to go sentence by sentence. Now you don't necessarily have to take notes for every sentence, because some sentences might not have any information that you really feel of value. So by the early 1500s, European fishing fleets were regularly summering along the Atlantic coast of Canada to fish for cod and trade with local native peoples. Alright, so key information here. I think we need to know when it was, although maybe not even necessary because I did put it in the topic title. But we need to know the who, I think. So Europeans. And what about them? Well, they were fishing for cod along the Atlantic coast. So we'll say cod, or you could use fish, and Atlantic coast. And I'm going to use Atlantic coast as one word because it's a location. And so I'm going to write that in my keynotes over here. (1500s), Europeans, cod, and Atlantic coast. So we do have 4 words there. Try not to use any more than 4 words, okay, or 4 ideas there. There's actually more than 4 words. But really, as I said, I could get rid of this if I wanted to, because I've written in the topic that it's the 1500s, so we already know that. Moving on, much of Europe was still Roman Catholic, and Catholics frequently abstained from meat. Okay, so we have Catholics, no meat. That was the main point there, I think. During the early part of the 16th century, there were a total of 165 meatless days in the church calendar. So maybe we write 165 meatless days. So you don't have to use the exact wording. I've changed the wording a little bit, but I've got that idea there. And then we've got cod. Most popular fish was young, lighty, salted, dried cod. Cod has a very mild flavor, which probably accounted for its popularity. So I'm going to say there, cod, popular, mild. And I'll know that what that means is that cod was popular because of its mild taste. Okay, so there we go. I've just taken notes for that first paragraph. So I've just kind of fast forwarded through this for you. So I've gone through, and for the rest of the article, I've taken the notes. So you can see that in the article, and I'll minimize it here, there were 4 paragraphs, and so in my notes here I have 4 paragraphs because each box represents a paragraph. So I've gone through the exact same thing that I did for the first paragraph, and I did it for the rest. Okay? Then what I did after I had written those notes was I came down and I summarized the information. So here's where I didn't look back at the article, so we can actually even get rid of the article. And what I did was I created some questions after doing a summary. Alright, so the summary was, so I just looked at these key points, and I said, okay, summarize this. What does this mean now? And I wrote the summary down here. So you can see from those simple points that I put up there in that first box, I added. In the 1500s, fish was an important staple in Europe because most people were Catholic, and Catholics did not eat much meat. See how I've put that in my own words, and I've identified the main idea there? So I did that for each of the paragraphs in that summary box at the bottom, and then I came up with the questions. So the idea behind the questions is that one, it helps you kind of synthesize the information and understand the significance of it, but the other thing it does is you can use it as a study tool in the future. So if you were to have a test on this information, what you would do is you would cover the information in this notes column. You'd ask yourself, so you'd only show the question column. You'd ask, why was the fish industry so big in the 1500s? And then with this information covered, you'd answer it, kind of the idea of cue cards or study cards, and then you could check, uncover it, and you'd have the answer there to see if you got it all. Okay, so that's one way to format your notes. So I've taken those exact same notes and I've placed them in this other kind of a chart. Okay. Now for this one, you'll see again there's the bibliography information. You type in Crossroads, page 220, and then for the notes section in this middle column, I've got the exact. So you'll see each paragraph contains the 3 keyword notes, exactly the same as that other sheet. But this time, instead of having the summary at the bottom or the main idea at the bottom of the sheet, once I finished this first paragraph, I went over and wrote down the main idea from the first paragraph. So I put it in my own words and summarized the main idea. So I did that in this last column. Okay? After I did that, and actually you don't even have to wait, you can do this while, but instead of coming up with questions, I just came up with the topic. So this paragraph was about the reasons for fish in Canada. This paragraph was about the risks. This paragraph was about coming ashore. And the final one was about the relationship between natives and Europeans. The very final thing in this system, though, instead of coming up with questions for each paragraph, at the very end you come up with one really good question that covers basically all of the or most of the main ideas in the notes. So the question I came up with was, why did Europeans come to Canada in the 1500s, and what was the experience like? And you can find all of that information from the notes above. Now the other thing I want to point out is if in your research you came across something that you thought sounded so good and it supported something you wanted to say and it was a great quote, then of course you can write that word for word out and include the page number beside it. But try to do that sparingly in your notes. It has to be something really fantastic that you think that the reader needs to know word for word what was said. So what I'd like you to do for the assignment now, I've given you an article or a piece to read from the Crossroads textbook, and I'd like you to choose one of these note-taking worksheets, either the first one or the second one, and I want you to complete it using the 3 keyword system of note-taking. And then you'll need to submit that for marks.